my first question is self-enquiry and surrendering to God. Michael, I've heard this term a few times listening to Bhagavan's teachings and yourself, so on. Could you explain what does this mean, surrendering to God?
Well, sometimes Bhagavan said that there are two means, self-investigation and self-surrender. But though he sometimes presented them as two means, he made it very clear, but ultimately they are one and the same practice. In the initial stages of, that is, surrender usually begins from the path of bhakti. That's the path of devotion. So it usually is anyone who is devoted to God, and devoted to God not just for the many people who consider themselves to be devotees of God. They actually are devoted to the things that they think God can do for them. They pray to God for health, wealth, and well-being, and all these material things, or even for going to heaven, or whatever is their idea. But these are all things that people hope to gain from God. This isn't devotion to God. This is devotion to the things that we think God can do for us. But that's a very, well, we can say it's a very immature stage of devotion. But gradually the devotion matures into true love for God. Love for God for the sake of God alone, not for the sake of what we can get from God. So when we love God without any expectation, we just love God for the sake of God, we come to that stage of devotion because we begin to understand more about the nature of God, that God is all loving, all knowing, all powerful. So whatever happens, since he's all knowing, all loving, all powerful, whatever happens could not happen without his consent. That is, because he's all-knowing, it cannot happen without his knowledge. Because he's all-powerful, it cannot happen without his consent. And because he's all-love, it cannot happen without, if it were not what is best for us. So whatever happens is the will of God, and is therefore for what is best for us. When we come to understand that, we cease to ask anything of God. We just want to give ourselves to God. That is, in mature love, we can see it in human relationships. There are some couples who think they're in love, but actually each is concerned for their own benefit. What can I get out of this relationship? So long as we are looking to get something out of a relationship, we actually don't get much out of it. To the extent to which love is about giving ourselves. The more we give ourselves to the other, to the one we love, the more we thereby get out of it. We get out of it because giving is the greatest of all benefits. That is, to the extent to which we give ourselves, to that extent are we benefited. So that's true even in human relationships. It is many times more true in relationship between the soul and God. Because of our love for God, we want nothing but to give ourselves to God. So it's on the path of devotion that this surrender usually begins. And in most religions, there's this idea of everything is the will of God, and we have to surrender to the will of God. In other words, surrender to the will of God means we are giving up our own will, our own likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, fears, and everything. Whatever, your will is my will. I don't want anything except what you want for me. Thy will be done. That is the attitude with which the path of surrender begins. So the path of surrender begins, we are trying to surrender our will to the will of God. This is still there's still dualistic devotion here. We still take God to be something other than ourselves, And we just want to give ourselves to that God. But as our devotion matures, we come to understand that God cannot be anything other than ourselves. That is, God is the infinite whole. If, as the infinite whole, there cannot be anything other than him. If there's anything other than God, then God is thereby limited. So if God is the infinite whole, we cannot be anything other than him. So what God actually is our own real nature. What we actually are is God. Obviously, that's not saying that we, this little person, I, Michael, am God. That is absurd, because Michael is a finite entity. But what I actually am, that is God. In other words, God is our own real nature. What we actually are, as is explained by Bhagavan and by Advaita philosophy in general, our real nature is just pure awareness. Now we take ourselves, the pure awareness is awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. It's aware only of itself. It's aware only of I am. So the I am in its purity, that is what we actually are. But now, as ego, we're not aware of ourselves just as I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person, I am so-and-so. So this is the pure I am mixed with adjuncts. So this is the nature of ego. Ego is not the pure I am, it's the pure I am mixed with adjuncts. So long as we rise as ego and identify ourselves with adjuncts, we seem to be separate from God. Though God is what we actually are, we are not aware of ourselves as such, because I'm now aware of myself. I am this little person who was born at such and such a time, is occupying such a small point in time and space, and one day this person's going to go away. So by rising as ego and thereby identifying ourselves with as a person, we have seemingly separated ourselves from God. Of course, we never can separate ourselves from God, because he is the one infinite whole. He's the one substance of which everything else is a mere appearance. So, as I say, as our love matures and we begin to understand, along with the maturing of our love comes the maturing of our understanding of the nature of God. So God is not something other than ourself. God is ourself. So merely, and so long as we seem to be separate from God, we seem to have a will of our own. However much we try to surrender our will to God, we cannot surrender our will completely so long as we remain separate from God, because the nature of ego is to grasp things other than itself. As Bhagavan says about ego, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving one form, it grasps another form. So this grasping is the very nature of ego. So long as we exist as ego, we cannot be totally free of likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So by the dualistic path of devotion, we can surrender our will to a certain extent. That is, we can to some extent detach ourselves from all these. I mean, we can create that, we can weaken the strength of our likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments. So they still are there, but they're not so strong as they were. But in order to get rid of all likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments, we have to surrender their root. What is the root of all desires and attachments? It is I, this ego, because it's only as ego that we have all these desires and attachments. In sleep, we don't rise as ego. Therefore, we are free of all. In sleep, we have no likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, fears, or anything. But as soon as we arise in waking and dream, all these come along with ego. So these are the very nature of ego. So if we want our surrender to be complete, we have to surrender this ego. So how to surrender this ego? This is where self-investigation comes in. Because what is this ego? As Bhagavan said, ego is nothing but a false awareness of ourselves. Instead of being aware of ourselves as we actually are, that is, as just I am, we are aware of ourselves as I am this or I am that. I am this body, I am this person, I am so-and-so. So, because the ego is a false awareness of ourselves, an awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are, we can eradicate this ego or surrender ourselves only by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. And in order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. We need to turn our attention inwards. So ultimately, the surrender can be complete only by yes, it can be, our surrender can become complete only by means of self-investigation. So we can say that the culmination of the path of devotion is surrender, and the culmination of the path of surrender is self-investigation. Because without self-investigation, we cannot surrender this ego entirely. There's a little bit more I can say in this regard. That is, Bhagavan has revealed something about the nature of ego, but as far as I'm aware, has never been explained so clearly in any of the ancient texts. That is what Bhagavan says. I referred earlier to a verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, in which Bhagavan says, he describes ego as Uruvatra. That means formless phantom ego. He calls it formless because ego has no form of its own. He calls it a phantom because it's got no substance of its own. But the substance it borrows is the one real substance, which is awareness. And the form it borrows is the form of a body. It takes a body to be I. So it mixes awareness and the body. The body has no awareness of its own. Its body is what is called in Sanskrit jada. That means it's insentient. It's non-aware.
Is this what's meant by body consciousness?
Body consciousness. Body consciousness can mean just we are conscious of the body, but the body is then like an object. I think the term body consciousness may be a translation of the Sanskrit term Dehatma Buddhi. Dehatma Buddhi means the awareness of the body as oneself. Deha means body, Atma means oneself, Buddhi means in this context awareness. So Dehatma Buddhi is the I am the body awareness. That may be what is meant by body consciousness, because whenever we are conscious of the body, we're always conscious of the body as I. So this body, this Dehatma Buddhi, this body, I am this body awareness. It's a mixture of awareness with an adjunct, the body, which is this body. As I say, it is non-aware. It's insentient. So what Bhagavan says in verse 25, the ego is a formless phantom ego. It's a formless phantom. How does it come into existence? Grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes. Leaving one form, it grasps another form. But if sought, it takes flight. A lot of Bhagavan's verses are just like aphorism. A lot of very deep meaning is packed into some very, very simple words. By what he means by grasping form, that is, because ego itself is formless, how does a formless phantom grasp form? We grasp form by being aware of it. But the first form we grasp is the form of a body, which we grasp as as ourself. Without being aware of ourselves as a body, we couldn't be aware of other forms. So we first become aware of ourselves as I am this body, and then through the five senses of that body, we become aware of all these gross forms in the world, and we also become aware of the subtle forms within, the thoughts, feelings, emotions and all these more subtle forms. But the basis of our awareness of forms is our awareness of ourself as I am the form of this body. But because the ego itself is formless, it has no form of its own. So whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. So this body is not ourself. It seems to be ourself. We experience it as ourself. We constantly refer to this body as I. I am sitting, I am talking, I am thinking, that body of mine we take to be I, but they are not actually I. Because the nature of ego is to grasp form, and it cannot stand without grasping form, the natural tendency of ego is to go outwards. That means to direct its attention outwards towards things other than itself. Outwards means away from itself. In self-investigation, we are trying to turn our attention inwards, that is back towards ourself. So instead of grasping forms, we are trying to grasp ourself. And ourself here means ego, but ego is a formless phantom. So when ego tries to grasp itself, it subsides and disappears because it cannot stand without grasping a form. That is why Bhagavan says, if sought, it takes flight. If sought here means if ego turns its attention back on itself to see who am I or what am I, because there's no form for it to grasp, it automatically dissolves, subsides and dissolves back into the source from which it arose. That's what he means by taking flight. It disappears. So we seem to be ego only so long as we are looking elsewhere. When we're looking away from ourselves at other things, we seem to be ego. But when we turn our attention back towards ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found. So the means by which we can surrender ego, which is this, it is only ego that separates us from God, because ego is this false identification of ourselves with something other than ourselves. So in order to surrender this ego, we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves, because so long as we attend to anything else, even if we attend to a name or a form of God or any idea we may have about God, that is still something other than ourselves. Any thought, any idea, any concept is something other than ourselves. So any idea we have of God is something other than ourselves. What God actually is only that fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. So it's only by turning our attention within that we can truly attend to God, and that we can truly give ourselves to God, because to the extent to which we focus our attention on ourselves, we are thereby withdrawing our attention from other things. And when we withdraw our attention from other things, because the ego isn't holding on to forms, it subsides and dissolves back into its source. What is the source of the ego? The source of the ego is that fundamental awareness I am.
So this is like a limiting idea of the self, isn't it? The ego is a limiting idea.
Yeah. Because we are limiting, that is, what we actually are, as pure awareness, we are the one infinite whole. There's nothing other than ourselves. But when we rise as ego, we limit ourselves because we take a particular body. This body is I. Everything outside this body is not I. So we've limited ourselves within the confines of this small body. And this body is limited not only in space, but also in time. It's born at a certain time and it's going to die at a certain time. So all the limitations of time and space come into existence only when we rise as ego.
So Michael, it's a strange thing trying to ask a question about such things, but I'll try. Am I like a limited consciousness? And when I attain liberation, I become part of an infinite consciousness? Is that what is meant by God? Is God infinite consciousness?
What you say is an approximation, but it's an imprecise way of saying it. Firstly, you don't become a part. You become the whole. Secondly, it's not actually a matter of becoming, because you are already that. You are already the whole. But as ego, you seem to be limited. But whatever limitation is there is only a seeming limitation. It's not real. Because the fundamental principle of Advaita, it's expressed in the Upanishads, but what we actually are is ekam eva advaityam. That means one only without a second. So we alone are. There is nothing other than ourselves. But now we're aware of all this multiplicity as if so many things exist. So all this multiplicity is a mere appearance, and ourself as a separate subject, seeing all these objects, that is all an appearance. What we actually are, what we always actually are, is the infinite whole. So when we turn our attention back within and surrender ourselves back to that infinite whole, we as a separate entity dissolve in that, and then we remain as we always actually are. Because even now, when we've risen as ego and seem to be aware of ourselves as I am this body, this false awareness, I am this body, though it distorts or it seems to distort the pure awareness I am, it never completely conceals it. We are always aware of ourselves as I am. And Bhagavan said, there is nothing else to be known. It's not what is called jnana, which is knowledge or pure awareness. It is not a new knowledge to be attained, because we are already that. All we need to do is to cast off these limitations, and we remain as we always are. Because the limitations, though they seem to be very real now, they are not actually real at all. They're just a mere appearance. And they appear only in the view of ourself as ego. In the view of pure awareness, it is always pure awareness. There never is any ego or world or anything.
Is it then helpful to, rather than say, I am Rab, I am a human, I live in the realm called Earth, and so on, is it better to relate to myself as infinite awareness?
That is, it is not just a matter of saying. That is, it is actually your experience now that you are Rab. So merely, some people misunderstand the teaching, but what the practice of Advaita is. In the past, people have thought, okay, but they misinterpret what is written in the old text, and they take it to mean that all we have to do in order to know what we actually are, we have to meditate. I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not this Rab, I am Brahman. But that is just, all those are just thoughts. Who is thinking those thoughts? That ego which is now mistaking itself to be Rab. So that you cannot, so long as you're feeding the ego with thoughts, you cannot separate yourself from ego. In order to separate ourselves from ego, we need to turn our attention within. We need to cling just to that fundamental awareness I am. Even the thought I am Brahman, we have to leave aside. We have to cling only to, if I am Brahman, then we can forget about Brahman, because Brahman is some supposedly unknown entity. But I am, we know very well. Let's cling to that I am. That will take us to Brahman, because that I am is Brahman.
It's crazy, because it's ego that's trying to get liberated, because I want to reduce the suffering I experience and experience peace and happiness forevermore, and take my loved ones there too. So it's kind of like ego is chasing something.
Yes. Which it can never get, because as ego, we can never know what we actually are, because ego is the problem. The problem, we have to give up that. The solution is to give up ego. Only when we give up ego can we remain as we always actually are. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about these things. There are so many people nowadays who claim I am self-realized. That I that claims to be self-realized is ego. Because Brahman, what Brahman means our real nature, what we actually are. We'll never say I am self-realized, because it is always aware of nothing other than itself. The I that says I am self-realized is ego. And ego can never be self-realized, because the ego is, by definition, a false awareness of ourself.
I know quite a few spiritual people and religious people, and they cling tightly to this identity that I am such a spiritual person. I have been on retreat for many years, and they develop all these ideas of pride and ego, and they go about telling people how spiritual they are.
This is the nature of ego. Ego always wants an identity. Ego cannot. So this is what Bhagavan says: grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. So we like to identify ourselves with something. I am English, I am Scottish, I am European, I'm Indian, I'm American, I am Christian, I'm Buddhist, I'm Muslim, I'm Jew, I'm Jain, I'm Hindu. All these are identifications. So long as we identify ourselves with anything, we are limiting ourselves. If we want to go beyond all limitations, we have to give up this ego, which is the false I, but is always identifying itself with this or that. The only true identity, Bhagavan has expressed it very beautifully, what we actually are. But if you want to express our identity correctly, the only correct way of expressing our identity is I am I. Because we cannot be anything other than ourselves. So we cannot be anything other than I. So if you say I am a human, I am God, I am Brahman, I am Jew, I am Jain, I am Hindu, I'm Christian, I'm Buddhist, I'm Chinese, I'm Japanese, I'm American, I'm Australian. Whatever it is, these are all false identifications. What we are is only that I am and nothing but I am.
So that's the only correct identification, pure awareness.
Yes. Yep.
Everything else is false. And then when we posit self on these false appearances, forms, names, and so on, this is the limiting beliefs. Yeah,
we are neither spiritual nor worldly. We are neither a saint nor a sinner. We are just ourselves, nothing but ourselves.
Michael, there's such a freedom in that, isn't that? I mean, I can just get a taste of that. It's such a lovely thought not to have an identity.
Freedom. Yes.
Sorry, what was you going to say? The ultimate?
It's the ultimate freedom. Because all bondage, all limitation arises when we identify ourselves with this or that. But why to identify, when we are the infinite whole, why should we identify ourselves with anything? When we identify ourselves with something, we are limiting ourselves, and limitation is bondage. So if we want to be free, we have to give up all identity, all forms of identification.
So if I asked you to put it into words, if I say, I am I, can I say I am pure awareness?
You can, but again, pure awareness is now an idea for you. Rather than saying I am this or I am that, who am I? It's a very useful thing. That is, we need to investigate ourselves. So long as we are talking about pure awareness, the words pure awareness are pointing at something. But so long as until we experience ourselves with pure awareness, it's still an idea in our mind. There is an awareness that is not aware of anything. That is what I actually am. That's still an idea. We need to, and all ideas occur to the first idea. The first idea, the root thought, as Bhagavan said, is this ego, the thought called I, as he often referred to it. So we need to go beyond all thoughts, beyond all ideas, to who is aware of this idea, I am pure awareness. So we need to be turning our attention away from all ideas, away from all words, away from everything other than that mere awareness I am.
We're trying to express the inexpressible, aren't we? You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I heard this thing, you know, a knife can cut many things, but cannot cut itself. A
yeah,
set of scales can weigh many things, but cannot
yeah,
weigh itself.
yeah.
So the mind, or sorry, should I say, pure awareness, cannot know itself. It can only be itself.
Well, no, but it's often said like that, but that is, even that is not correct, because pure awareness is always aware of itself, but it is not aware of itself as an object of awareness. That is, just by being aware, we are aware. Being aware entails being aware, but I am aware. And to be aware, but I am aware, it means being aware, but I am. So I am, or I am aware, is not an object of awareness. It is just the nature of awareness to be aware of itself.
Hang on a minute, you're going to have to slow that down a little bit there, Michael. I'm a little baby.
Okay.
Baby.
Okay. All these teachings are given in words because our minds are outward going. But the aim of the words, all that Bhagavan has taught us in words, it has one aim and one aim alone. That is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. In order to attend to ourselves, we need to leave behind all words, all ideas, everything we need to leave other than ourselves. So we need to go deep, deep within. In other words, we need to focus our attention very deeply on ourselves. So we need to attend to ourselves so keenly, but we thereby cease to be aware of all other things. Then only will we actually experience ourselves as pure awareness.
Yeah, I'm trying to look what it is. I tried this in meditation, and I'm trying this each day, trying to get more into it. And I'm trying to look to find
Yes.
That we are talking about.
Yeah. But though it's sometimes said to find it, it's not actually a thing to find, because we are already that. We are not, it's not a case of one eye looking for another eye. We are trying to, we are always self-aware, but because so long as we allow our attention to go outwards, we are negligently self-aware. That is, the self-awareness is always there in the background. We're always aware I am, but we're taking far more interest in other things. We need to withdraw our interest, our attention from other things, and try to bring it back to this I am. So just try to be aware of I am and nothing but I am.
So in this sense then, I am already enlightened. I am already realized.
You already are, yes. That's what Bhagavan repeatedly said. That's why he said there's nothing new to be gained. You are already that. All you need to do is to give up the false knowledge that you are anything other than that. So long as you are aware of yourself as I am Rab, I am this person, I am in this particular point in time and space, you're not aware of yourself as pure awareness. So in order to be aware of yourself with pure awareness, you need to turn your attention back towards yourself and leave aside all these ideas about here and now. And we need to go beyond all concepts, all names, all forms, all objects. Leave everything behind. Just cling only to yourself and nothing but yourself.
I've had glimpses of this. I mean, I do try this each day, and I'm practicing, especially when I walk the dog. You know, I used to listen to teachings on headphones, and now I walk in silence and try and be aware of my. Actually, we spoke about this in the first interview we did, Michael, didn't we, in part 1? And I was explaining how I was living in the present moment, and I was using my senses to see, hear, listen, and that was mistaken, because that was step 1 of this process. Step 2 is, who is it that's aware? And that's who we want to be. This is where the place we want to be, isn't it?
Yeah. That is the natural flow of our attention, is to go outwards, because the natural inclination of ego is always to be trying to grasp things other than itself. Now we are trying to turn back in the opposite direction. We are trying to turn away from other things towards ourselves. But we shouldn't be thinking, I have to avoid other things, because so long as we're thinking, I have to avoid other things, I have to avoid attending to anything else, we are thinking of those things we need to avoid. We just forget everything else. The only thing we need to do is to attend to ourselves. We need to try and focus more and more and more on ourselves. Our self is not an object. So because our attention is habituated to going outside, it has become a relatively gross and blunt instrument. So in order to focus our attention on ourselves, what we ourselves actually are is the subtlest of all subtle things. So we need a very sharp and refined and clear, keen power of attention. Because our attention is too gross at the moment, we cannot distinguish ourselves from all these adjuncts that we now mistake ourselves to be. But the more we practice this, the more we try to turn our attention back towards ourselves, the more we are thereby refining our power of attention. We are sharpening our power of attention, so to speak. And thereby we are able to go deeper and deeper. So all we need to do is just to cling to I am. Because our attention is accustomed to going outwards, it has become relatively gross and it's become a blunt instrument, so to speak, because all external things means not only the objects of the world, but even the thoughts and the feelings and all these things, everything other than ourselves is relatively gross. So because we've been attending to these gross things, our power of attention has become a blunt instrument. Now, when we're trying to turn our attention back within, in order to distinguish ourselves from all the adjuncts that we seem to be, we need a very sharp power of attention. That is, we need a very keen and subtle power of attention. So our present relatively gross power of attention needs to be refined and clarified. How do we refine and clarify it? By this practice. The more we try to turn our attention back within, the more we are sharpening and refining our power of attention, the more we are becoming capable of discerning that subtle awareness, which is the background. For an example Bhagavan often gave, when you go to a cinema and watch a film for 2 hours or something, what you're actually looking at all the time is the screen. But though you are always looking at the screen, you never notice the screen. Because why you've gone to the cinema? Because you're interested in the pictures that are projected on the screen. So we completely, though we are always seeing only the screen, we completely ignore the screen, and because of our interest in the pictures. Now we need to try to be aware just of the screen and to ignore the pictures. The screen is this fundamental awareness I am. So in order to distinguish this fundamental awareness I am, this background awareness, from all the phenomena that appear within it, we need a very keen and subtle power of attention. We can acquire that keen and subtle power of attention only by this constant practice of turning our attention back within.
Michael, could I share a video with you? And we could share this on the video so the viewers can see. And I would like to get your feedback on this.
Okay, right.
Images on a screen. While the action is taking place, we all forget, temporarily, that we are merely watching a display of colored lights. We take the figures to be real and become engrossed in the little dramas of their everyday lives. Occasionally, we become aware that we are watching, that the pictures are not real, that they are just images on a screen. When this happens, we subconsciously differentiate between what is real and what is unreal. The man watching in his chair assumes, I, the observer of this film, am real. The pictures on the screen, they are not real. Now step back one stage further. Here is a new film. The original observer and the film he was watching are both now displayed on the same screen. The observer, who formerly thought himself to be real, is now just as unreal as the film he was watching. Now, what is real about this picture? What here is permanent? What remains unchanged while all these pictures come and go? It is the screen. Your own self, your own reality, is the screen upon which all the unreal pictures of the world are displayed. All the pictures on the screen, including the form and the person you take yourself to be, are supported by the screen of your own self. When you recognize yourself to be the substratum, the screen, and not the name and form which appear upon it, you are free. If there is a fire in the movie, it will not burn the screen. If there is water, the screen will not get wet. When you discover who you really are, when you discover that you are the screen of consciousness and not the images that appear upon it, you are untouchable, indestructible. You are free.
So you wanted to know my opinion on that?
Yes, please.
It is an analogy, and like all analogies, it has its limitations. What is in a dream? We see a world full of so many people, and we see ourselves as one among those many people. All the other people and the rest of the world are all objects perceived by us. Not only are all those other people objects perceived by us, even the person we seem to be in that dream is an object. So now this person that I now take myself to be is actually an object of my awareness, though I, the subject, now identify myself with this object. But the one thing that can never become an object is the dreamer. The dreamer dreams itself to be an object, a person, but though it dreams itself to be an object, it is never actually an object. The dreamer is ego. Ego can never become an object because ego is always the subject. The subject can never become an object. The subject can identify itself, or the subject does identify itself with objects, but without identifying itself with an object, it couldn't be aware of other objects. So as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as a person, but what is aware is not this person. This person, the person consists of body and mind. All are insentient. What is sentient, what is aware, is only ego. As ego, we can never be an object of our awareness. In this analogy, Bhagavan talked about the screen. Sometimes he referred to the fundamental awareness I am as the screen, but in other places he talked about there's an intermediate screen, so to speak. The intermediate screen is ego. That is, it's only in the view of ego that all these other pictures appear. In the view of the original awareness, the pure awareness, no pictures ever appear. So the screen on which we are experiencing all these things is this mixed awareness, I am this body. Only when we're aware of ourselves as I am this body are we aware of all these other things. But what is it that supports this false awareness, I am this body, is that real awareness, I am. So that is the ultimate reality. But the problem we now face is this intermediate this intermediary, this ego, which is what is aware of all other things. So, as I say, ego is a false awareness of ourself. There are two defining characteristics of ego. Firstly, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. And consequently, we are also aware of other things. When we are not aware of ourselves as I am this body, as in sleep, we're not aware of anything other than ourselves. So it's only when we rise as ego, as this false awareness that is always aware of itself as I am this body, that we become aware of other things. So the screen on which all these pictures are appearing is the screen of ego. The screen on which ego is appearing is that ultimate screen I am. But as I say, we have to be very careful with analogies to take what is useful from them and not to stretch them beyond their intended purpose. In a lot of Advaitins say even ego is an object. That is wrong. Ego can never be an object. Ego is the subject. So long as we rise as ego, we are aware of objects. The pure awareness is never aware either of the subject or of the objects, because pure awareness is awareness that is aware only of itself. So it's only when we rise as ego, but we seem to be a subject and therefore seem to be aware of objects. So when ego tries to see itself, it can never see itself as an object, but when it tries to see itself just as itself, as I said earlier, the nature of ego, it rises by grasping form, by being aware of things other than itself. When it tries to grasp only itself, to be aware only of itself, it thereby subsides and dissolves back into the pure awareness, which is what it actually is.
It's really encouraging, Michael. I was going to ask you, what methods can we use to develop our concentration to help us get to this place a lot quicker? And you said it strengthens our concentration, focusing on awareness.
Yes, but there are people who have a very strong power of concentration. If you're very interested in something, supposing you're a football fan, when you go to a football match, you have no problem concentrating on the football match. You watch, because you're passionate interest in that football match, you're constantly watching the ball, who is kicking it, where the players are going. You have no difficulty in concentrating on that game because of your interest. So merely developing concentration there are people who can concentrate on, well, I mean, everyone is able to concentrate on what they interest them. But people who have difficulty with concentration, people who suffer from attention deficit disorder, it's because they're interested in so many things. So their mind's darting here, there. So they're not focusing on one thing. But if you're interested in anything, when you go to watch a film, if it's a very interesting film, you concentrate on it from beginning to end. You don't think about anything else. Your mind is wholly absorbed in that story, on that drama going on the screen. So concentration is it may be, if you're someone who suffers from attention deficit disorder, then you may need to develop concentration. In order to acquire the concentration that we need to attend to ourselves, all we need to do is to be passionately interested in knowing who am I. We need to be more interested in knowing who am I than we are in all the other things that we're interested in. At present, we are still so much interested in all these phenomena, all these pictures on the screen. What's going on in the world, what the news is, what the latest R rate is, whether the pandemic is being brought under control, whether the vaccine is going to work, who's going to be the next president of America. There's so many things in the world that are constantly catching our attention, catching our interest. So long as we're interested in those things, turning within is difficult. But the more we practice trying to turn within, the more we become unconcerned about the external world. After all, the world has always been a place of drama. There have always been wars and famines, and it's a place of all sorts of things go on in this world. It's endless. The world has never been a place of justice. There have always been injustices in the world. There are injustices now as much as there ever were in the past. So it's a drama. It's an unending drama if we allow our attention to go outwards. But none of this drama is real. It's all ultimately just a dream. So if we want to develop the concentration that is required to turn our attention within, we need to give up interest in this drama and cultivate interest in knowing what we actually are. This, of course, is a gradual process, because our interest in knowing other things is what are called Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya means phenomena, and vasana means inclination. So our inclination towards phenomena are what are called Vishaya vasanas. We all have strong inclinations towards other things, because our mind has been accustomed to going outwards, to seeking happiness in outside things. If we're passionately interested in football, when we go and watch a football match, we feel happy because we get caught up in all the excitement and everything. But if you have no interest in football at all, and someone drags you along to a football match, you'll feel bored, and you won't be able to follow the match at all, because it just simply doesn't interest you. So it's all a matter of what we are interested in. We need to cultivate that interest, that passionate interest in knowing who am I. So developing concentration is, as I say, you can develop concentration by developing a passionate interest in football. You can develop concentration on football matches. That isn't going to help you much when you try to turn your attention within, because whenever you try to turn your attention within, you'll be thinking next Saturday there's a match going on, who's going to be winning that match, and whether my team is going to move up the league or whatever. So developing concentration on anything other than ourselves is not helpful. We need to have a passionate interest in knowing who am I.
You know, this saying, Michael, variety is the spice of life.
Yes,
it's an indication that we're looking for happiness in the wrong place, isn't it?
Exactly. And we'll always be disappointed, because the happiness doesn't lie in the external things. We wrongly associate happiness with for instance, suppose you like a particularly tasty meal. Whenever you're served that meal, you feel happy. Why? Because you had that desire for that tasty meal. When you get it, you're satisfied. So the agitation of the mind in the form of that desire is temporarily calmed. And so the happiness which is within you, you experience. But you think, oh, it's this tasty meal that makes me happy. So you want to have it again and again and again. It's like that with all types of pleasures, whether it's sensual pleasures or intellectual pleasures or whatever type of pleasures it is. Because of our desire for whatever it is, when we experience it, the desire is satisfied, so the agitation of mind is calmed down. We experience the happiness within us. The problem is we fail to recognize that the happiness we're experiencing is coming from within us. We think it's coming from whatever object it is that we had desire for.
This to bring this interview to a conclusion, Michael, we're coming up to the hour, I think. I kind of think you get a sense, you get an experience of bliss when you try and become aware, especially when I try and meditate on this.
Yes.
There's no fault in using that wish to experience more peace and happiness to pursue this path?
Anything that motivates us to turn our attention within is good. But if we are looking for transitory experiences, many people say, I meditate, I was in a state of bliss for 20 minutes. A state of bliss, whatever comes and goes is not real. The real happiness that we actually are is what is eternal. It's ever present. It's here and now. So if you feel some pleasure while turning your attention within, good, let that motivate you. But if that pleasure goes when your attention comes out, you still haven't reached the eternal happiness that you actually are.
I think that's why I asked that question, because is that eternal happiness liberation when I've attained that realization and it's stable?
Yes.
So this is the actual goal of every sentient being.
And it is stable only when ego is eradicated, because so long as ego is present, ego itself is coming and going. Ego appears in waking and dream, it disappears in sleep. So ego itself is transient. Whatever is experienced by ego is also transient. The only thing that is permanent is the fundamental awareness I am. Because I am, that fundamental awareness I am, is the only thing that shines throughout all the three states. All other things, including ego, appear and disappear. But I am alone remains, so that alone is real. And when we know the real nature of I am, we will find its infinite happiness.
That's beautiful, Michael.
But now, why don't we experience I am as infinite happiness? Because now I'm experiencing I am this finite body. So long as I experience myself as I am this finite body, I cannot experience myself as I am infinite happiness.
It's wonderful, Michael. I just love this stuff. I absolutely love it. I asked you before the interview, didn't I? Would you be happy to come on again and maybe make this a regular thing?
Yes. Whenever you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Where can we find you, Michael?
Go within and you'll find the real I. Finding Michael is not the aim. Finding I is the aim.
If people, it's a good answer. It's a good answer. If people want to connect with you, you've got a blog, and
I've got a website and a blog and a YouTube channel. Yes.
Michael, any final thoughts for everybody before we say goodbye?
The essence of Bhagavan's teachings is that we have to try more and more to turn within. That turn within means turn back towards I. There's a verse in Bhagavan sang in one of the songs he sang about Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala is a hill in South India, but Bhagavan said was his guru. And he said the real teaching is the teaching through silence. So Aruṇācala is teaching through silence. And what Aruṇācala teaches through silence, Bhagavan expressed very succinctly in one verse. Turning within, daily see yourself with the inner eye. It will be known. So that is what Aruṇācala teaches through silence, is that we have to turn our attention back within. And the more we turn our attention within, trying to see what we actually are, the more it will be revealed. And eventually, when we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego will thereby be annihilated. That is what Bhagavan taught us in words, and he said that is what is the eternal teaching in silence. Though he said it is taught, that is Aruṇācala is the silent teacher, he also said Aruṇācala is that which is always shining in our heart as I. So if we want to connect with that silence, which is our own real nature, and which is ever self-revealing, we have to turn our attention back within to face ourselves alone.